Okay, folks, so last time we met, we were talking about communication improvements, right? That's what we were talking about last time? So just to recap on communication improvements, one of the first communication improvements, folks, was the Pony Express. Now, the Pony Express was ideal because it allowed them to communicate much faster, right? We were able to communicate much faster because previously when we communicated, we wrote by letter, and that might take quite some time. But with the Pony Express, how quickly were they able to deliver mail? In 10 days or less, and that's like across the country, so that was pretty impressive. The problem is, delivering a message in 10 days, while that's faster than, let's say, 2.5 weeks, is that still fast enough for some messages? Now, some need to get there fast. Like, what if, like, the president died? You still need a faster message than 10 days. And so, the Pony Express eventually loses to what new technology? Morse code and the telegraph. And what's so beneficial about Morse code and the telegraph? It's instant communication. It's instant. Like Twitter today, right? If I was going to send you a letter in the mail, it might come in 2 days. But with Twitter, how instantly do you get that? Like right away. And so Twitter is very much like Morse code or the telegraph, except that Twitter is wireless. With the telegraph, you had to go to the telegraph station, and if you happened to be there when your message came in, it would be instant. Whereas with Twitter, it's anywhere just because of wireless technology. But again, it's the same idea, instant communication. Then you also have the Transatlantic Cable. The Transatlantic Cable was also using the telegraph, but it connected who? The U.S. and Europe. Because before, folks, how long did it take approximately to connect the U.S. and Europe?
3 weeks.
Maybe 3 weeks, in slower times, maybe 4 weeks. But with the Transatlantic Cable, how quickly could we communicate? Instantly. Again, instantly. And again, is this a big change for society if you can instantly communicate across the Atlantic Ocean? That's huge. And so this really did change the way things operated. This brought us to agricultural improvements, and this is where we kind of ended last time. So with agricultural improvements, folks, we need to talk about what farmers are doing specifically to make their crops better. Because transportation improvements are great, right? Because it allows us to sell more goods, we can move our crops faster, and that's awesome. The problem, though, is none of that matters if what? Being able to ship goods faster is great, but that doesn't matter if what? Yeah, if you have terrible crops or no crops to sell. Because up until about agricultural improvement and the antebellum era, most farmers were still what kind of farmers? Subsistence farmers. And again, what does it mean to be a subsistence farmer? You only grew enough to provide for you and your family. So even if you have all these roads and canals and railroads, are you going to be using them to ship your crops? Why not? You don't have enough to sell. You only have enough for you. But with agricultural improvements, where we can farm faster and better, is that going to drastically change how farmers farm? Sure. So the two types of improvements are, rather, these subsistence farmers will go from subsistence to commercial farming. They'll become commercial farmers. Or, what did we call those types of crops used in the colonial South, like tobacco? We're going to be cash crop farmers. And will this be a major shift for a lot of farmers? Because before, most farmers could only grow enough for themselves. But if we could give them technology to be a little bit more efficient, might they actually be able to make some money now? And so this is a major change. So those agricultural improvements that cause these shifts will be in the following. First off, the steel plow. The steel plow was created by who? Who? John Deere. John Deere, still around today, making tractors and whatever else. Pretty important guy. So you have John Deere, who created the steel plow. Now, does anyone know what the steel plow does? Like, what is the point of plowing the fields? Huh? It doesn't pick up hay. It doesn't pick up anything. Yeah. Precisely. It breaks the soil. It digs holes. It doesn't dig holes, but it breaks the soil, and it creates those lines. You know, if you look at a farm from like up high, bird's eye view, it creates those lines because the idea of a plow is to break dry, thick, rocky soil. Because, folks, if you're going to go ahead and start planting your crops, can you just start like throwing seeds on the ground? Like, oh, there's going to be tomatoes tomorrow. Can you do that? Where do the seeds have to go? In the ground. Now, here's the problem. Can you just put it in any ground? If the ground is really tough and almost like cement, are the seeds going to grow? No. If there's a lot of rocks, are those seeds going to grow? Why will rocks be bad for growing crops? What does rocks prevent? Growing, because those roots, are they going to prevent the roots from getting, the rocks will prevent the roots from getting bigger and bigger. So the idea is you take a steel plow, you take the metal end and you jam it into the ground. And then you attach it to what? A horse or children, depending on what you have lying around. But usually horses. And then you would attach it to a horse, and then you would have that horse pull it as you made sure that plow was in the ground. It would make this giant trough in the ground, and if there were any rocks, what would it do? It pushed those rocks to the side. And now do you have a nice piece of soil in the middle where you could put your seed and cover up with dirt again? Yes, and that's what steel plow did. And the reason why the steel plow is so important is before, would this be better than doing it with like wood? Why would doing this with wood and just wood be a problem? It would break. Or doing it with a shovel. Would that take forever? Yeah, go to the side here. I want to make a farm real quick. I'm going to have you guys just dig some holes for me. And see how long that'll take just to dig through the soil, plow it, make sure it comes up. That's going to take forever. So the steel plow was ideal. And folks, this primarily benefited which region of the country? North, west, or south? West. Because they're going to use this to grow things like what? Wheat, corn, whatever else. This is going to benefit the western states. Because they're going to use this to grow food. Wheat, crops, whatever else. And folks, by using the steel plow, why is this going to be good for regular farmers? What is this going to save us? Time. And time is money. So it's going to save us time. And also, if I have more time, what can I do more of? I can plant more. So it saves us time, and it allows us to grow more. And both of these means more what for me as a farmer? More money. Mucho dinero. Good so far with the steel plow? Awesome. Well, the next type of invention is the mechanical Mower-Reaper. Now, a mechanical Mower-Reaper, folks, let me first explain. A reaper is like a scythe that death uses. And the idea behind the reaper was what? What was it used for as in farming? Not for like killing people.
Cut wheat.
Yeah, to cut wheat, right? You would grab it, and then you would bend over and you would cut down the stalks, and someone would pick it up. Now, if that's all you have, would it be hard to harvest your crops this way? It's what we've been doing for years, but is it bad for the back? Is it slow going? I mean, you're limited by pretty much the distance of your arm length, right? You're pretty limited. So what the mechanical Mower-Reaper did was the job of 5 people. It pretty much increased harvesting 5 times. It was 5 times more efficient than your traditional reaper. And what it was, folks, is that you had this buggy that you would sit in, and there was a pole, and as you pushed that pole, it was attached to blades on the bottom here. These are the blades. And you would just quickly glide that forward, and you would cut all the crops in front of you, and it was going whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And as you cut that all down, some guy behind you would just pick it up. Easy. And is there any bending over of any kind? No, you don't even have to walk. You're just sitting down because who's pulling you? The horse. And so, very efficient. And is this going to be much faster? Yeah. Definitely. And so what is this going to save you? Time. So it's going to save time. And because you've saved time, what else can you do? You can grow more. And again, as before, when you save time and grow more, what does this mean to you? More money. Más dinero. 很多钱. More money. Lots of money. Cool? Okay. So save time, grow more, very effective. And again, folks, which region is going to benefit from this kind of technology? North, west, or south? Again, the west. So with these kinds of technologies, do you see how regular subsistence farmers are benefiting from the market revolution? They're getting new technologies. They're getting new types of technologies. Same word. Anyway, good so far? All right, so that's Western benefits. Another technology you should know is the cotton gin. Hey, cotton gin. Here's the question, folks. Who made the cotton gin? No, gin is just short for engine. It was not a... Eli Whitney. Now, it's rumored that Eli Whitney probably stole the invention from someone else.
That woman, right?
That woman, yes. But until that's proven, history tells us it's Eli Whitney. Anyway, Eli Whitney and the cotton gin. What was the purpose of the cotton gin? What did it do? Did it pick cotton? It separated what from the cotton? The seeds. Eli Whitney's cotton gin separated cotton from the seed. Now, people always assume the cotton gin was designed to, just pick cotton off of the cotton stalk. But that's not how it works, because this is a cotton stalk right here. And as you can see, can a machine cut this cotton off from the stalk? No, it has to be done by what? By hand. So who's going to pick the cotton? The slaves. Because you have to pick it one piece at a time. The problem, though, and that's what the cotton gin is for, is that what's inside each of these little cotton balls? Seeds. And is that going to be problematic when you're trying to make clothes, whatever else? So the cotton gin was designed to do what many slaves were asked to do, which was to open up the cotton, pick the seeds out one by one, and then kind of put it to the side. That took a really long time, folks. About every hour, you could maybe get 1 to 3 pounds the old way. But with the cotton gin made cotton picking 50 times more efficient. 50 times more efficient. Because you literally put it in the hopper box, you strain the blades, and it would stretch the cotton out, force it through a mesh, and the seeds wouldn't be pushed through. And so all these cotton balls with seeds would be forced into this mesh. The seeds would stay up here. And then all you have is clean cotton. Easy. All you have to do is turn. Versus picking at it and trying to pick out the seed one at a time. That machine did it 50 times faster. And so is that going to benefit the cotton production? Sure. By the way, which region is going to benefit from this? South. Definitely the South. Now here's the fun story about the cotton gin. Eli Whitney created the cotton gin in order to end slavery. In the 1790s, this is when the 1790s. I think it's 1793, but don't quote me on that. In the 1790s, Eli Whitney created the cotton gin because slavery was declining in America. It just wasn't profitable anymore. Not very many people were smoking tobacco. Cotton was just taking too much time. I mean, you get 1 pound per hour. Is that a good amount? No. And so it just wasn't efficient. So Eli Whitney thought to himself, I know what I'll do. I'll make the cotton gin. And by making the cotton gin, I'll make picking cotton easy, and then anyone can do it, and we won't need slaves anymore. But instead, people are like, whoa, I can make 50 pounds of cotton per hour? Quick, buy more slaves and let's buy more cotton gins and we'll make tons of money. And so Eli Whitney, who created the cotton gin intending to end slavery, single-handedly revived slavery in the 1790s. He is responsible for the revival of slavery. Because slavery was dying out, folks. It was going to end. There was no reason to have it because it just wasn't profitable. And then the cotton gin was created. And it made cotton profitable. And he was like, that's not what I intended. But that's what happened. So Eli Whitney single-handedly increased the thing he was trying to kill. So, sorry, Eli Whitney. Irony sucks. Cool with agricultural improvements? Good? Again, folks, and this, again, ultimately results in cotton plantations. Because now can you have a lot? And also increase slavery. So, not good, but it happened. Groovy? Groovy. Manufacturing improvements. So we talked about transportation improvements, communication improvements. We talked about agricultural improvements that benefited the West, and the South. So manufacturing improvements will likely emphasize which improvements in which region? The East or the Northeast. So these are improvements in the Northeast. And what you're going to see happening in this time, folks, is that the northeastern economy is going to shift from a cottage industry to a factory industry, or a cottage economy to a factory economy. Because, folks, before, we had something called the cottage industry. What is a cottage industry? What does that mean? When we make stuff, where do we make it? But what does that mean, though? We made it at home. I mean, think about it, folks. If you were like a blacksmith, where was your smith shop? Like in your house, right? Like in your backyard. If you were going to be making shirts, where did you make shirts from? In your house. If you were a housewife and you cooked and cleaned, but you had extra time, might you also sew and stitch and make clothing? And you might sell that on the side. Well, with the factory system, do you continue to make all these things at home? No, you start making them in the factory. So you see the shift from a cottage industry to a factory industry. Pretty much what you see is a separation of work and home life. Because before factories, folks, where did you work? At home. Right? If you were a farmer, where did you work? At home. If you're a blacksmith, where did you work? At home. If you were a doctor, where did you work? At home. You would have like an extra bed in your house, and that's where the patients would come and be like, oh, you're sick. Let's put some snakes on you. Have some in the backyard. But that's how that worked, folks, because were you going to be wealthy? Like, was there someone like building and saying, hey, we have rooms for rent for new businesses? We don't do that yet. Like the front of your house, that's your business, and then maybe the upstairs or the back of the house is where you live. Does that make sense to everyone? That's where you live. So anyway, folks, manufacturing improvements. First thing you should note, Samuel Slater. Samuel Slater is known as the father of the American factory system. Factory system. He's the father of the American factory system. Now, the reason why that's important is that Samuel Slater was an immigrant from England. And what happened back then in England was that he was a factory manager. And if you were a top-level factory employee, England would not let you leave the country. Now, why wouldn't England let top-level factory employees not leave the country? He was afraid that they would what? Like share ideas of how factories work. And that's exactly what Samuel Slater did. Because he looked over at America that wasn't very industrialized yet. And did he see an opportunity to make a lot of money. He said, I know how a factory works. I've drawn up the blueprints. I've built factories for, the British economy. What if I took these ideas and sold my services to America? So he did just that. He immigrated to America secretly, and he became the father of the American factory system by giving us all the blueprints and ideas that England was doing in their own factory system. And he gave us like a 50-year head start. Because in most times, we'd have to figure all that stuff out on our own. But he gave us those things, and he kind of said, just do this. I'm sweet. We figured it out. So Samuel Slater, father of the American factory system. You should also know the Lowell Mills. The Lowell Mills was created by Francis Lowell, and he created the Lowell Mills system. It was another type of factory. This was in the 1830s. Sorry, 1813. And the thing about the Lowell system was that Francis Lowell, his factory system became a model factory for other factories in New England because he hired only New England farmers' daughters. He only hired New England farmers' daughters, and that's not because he was kind of a creeper. That's not why he did it. Okay. So he hired New England farmers' daughters. Why hire them? Why not hire men? Well, men are already working on the farms, right? And women, are they less expensive? Yeah. Yes, we can hire them for less. So he hired only women because they weren't working already. And he said, hey, I will hire you. But the interesting thing, folks, is that his system was a model factory because, one, his workers were happy. He had happy workers, which is pretty unusual if you work in a factory. And the reason why his workers were happy was for a number of reasons. Number one, they had fair wages. They didn't get paid like crazy amounts, but they got fair wages. They got paid a decent amount. Also, they got to live in dorms, so they lived together. They were required to go to church. They were not allowed to have boyfriends. So again, they weren't distracted by the opposite gender. And so they were efficient. Because, folks, is a happy worker a good worker? Yeah. Yes. A bad worker is going to work as slowly as possible, right? Are you going to pay me this much? Okay, fine. I'll show you how to build a car. Oh no, I dropped my hammer. And so that's what happens. But a happy worker is a good worker. You want to do what's best for the company. And so this was very efficient, folks. Again, interestingly enough, called the Lowell Offering, which is like a magazine where the girls got to write stories and poems, and they have the biopic, the Lowell Girl of the Week. No, she walks on the beach and likes reading books. Interesting. So again, this was the Lowell Mill system, and it was a model system for quite some time because they were efficient. Again, a happy worker was a good worker. But ultimately, the Lowell Mill system ends because of what? Why do we eventually, in the 1840s, stop hiring New England farmers' daughters? In the 1840s and 50s, why do we stop hiring New England farmers' daughters? Because of the Irish. So we decide to replace them eventually with Irish immigrants. Because, hey, you know what? Yes, these girls might be more efficient and they work faster, but they still cost a lot. So hiring one girl that works really efficiently for $5 is good, but hiring two Irish people that are not so happy, but hiring them for $2 makes a lot more sense. So again, they began to hire cheap immigrants because it would cost them less. And so the Lowell mill system, good idea, but they're eventually replaced by cheap labor, specifically Irish immigrants. Cool. That's Lowell system. Then interchangeable parts. This is really important, folks. Interchangeable parts. So, interchangeable parts was created by Eli Whitney. Really important what he did here. Let me explain what interchangeable parts are. Before interchangeable parts was created, what happened was that if you were going to get, let's say, a gun made, you went to the blacksmith and he made a gun or the gunsmith, he made a gun just for you. Now the problem is if your gun broke, let's say the trigger broke, could you go to the hardware store and just buy a new trigger for your gun? No, you had to go back to that gunsmith. He had to take your gun, take it apart, and make a brand new trigger because was that trigger specific for that gun? So every product was unique. Every car, every phone, whatever, every single item was made uniquely. And that's great because that's craftsmanship, but is that very expensive? And also the problem is if something breaks, is it going to be really problematic? Imagine, folks, if your cell phone, let's say your cell phone battery broke, and so instead of having to go to Walmart and just buy a new one, you had to send your phone all the way back to Samsung. They would open up your phone, take measurements, create a new battery, put it in, make sure it fits, put new battery, like juice in it, and then send you back your phone to make sure that your phone had the right custom battery for you. Would that take way too long? Sure. Imagine if lead pencils were all made separately. So you were using your lead and you were like, oh my gosh, I ran out of lead. Can you borrow lead from someone else? No. You're going to have to go take your pencil to the store and be like, I need more lead for this pencil. They're going to take it, they're going to put it in a machine, they're going to measure that diameter of that hole, and they're going to go ahead and take graphite, they're going to start winding it out. How many pieces do you want? You want 12 pieces? I'm going to make you 12 individual custom-made pieces of lead for your lead pencil. Is that going to be expensive, though? Very expensive. How slow is that going to be? Very slow. But with interchangeable parts, the reason why this was different was that all parts were what? They were the same. They were interchangeable. Folks, are the nails that they use to build the roof of my house probably the same as the nails they use to build your house? Probably. Are the shoelaces on my shoes probably the same as the shoelaces on your shoes? Probably not, because of the type of shoes that we wear. But when I wear my cool shoes, are they probably the same as your shoes? Yes. And so again, this is what it comes down to, folks, is that imagine that all your shoes were custom made. So if you had to get new shoelaces, they had to be custom made for your shoes. Would that take too long? Versus just going to Walmart, could you buy any shoelace? And would that be applied to almost every shoe? Yes. Imagine going to Home Depot and they didn't sell nails. They had to make nails for you. Like, my cabinet broke. Oh, really? What do you need? Well, this nail, it broke. Oh, we're going to have to make those for you. So let's measure it. Let's put in some, more new steel ore. Let's craft this nail one more time. Versus, they're in aisle 3. We have literally thousands of them, of that one nail. Now, the benefits of interchangeable parts then are this. Because everything is the same, how many can you make of that one thing? A lot. So interchangeable parts, folks, resulted in mass production. And if you're making a lot of things, folks, what are you going to need to make a lot of things? A lot of resources. Where are you going to make all these lots of things? Factories. So you see the rise of factories. Because if you have a guy just making nails in his workshop for each individual person, does he need a factory for that? Oh, if you have one guy. If you're making custom stuff, do you need factories? No, but if you're making all the same thing, can I hire all of you to make the exact same item? Yes, so it's factories. And folks, because you have factories, the benefits are one, if you're making a lot of stuff, how does that benefit you and me? How do you benefit from having tons of stuff made exactly the same way? Much cheaper. The cost is much, much lower. And also the other benefit, it's faster and easier. Make sense to everyone, folks? Okay. Imagine, because, I mean, just think of like your TV cables or computer cables. What if like every TV cable or like every computer cable in the back was different for every single television? So if your TV cable broke, you can just replace it with something else. That'd be annoying. Yes? This is still Jackson, Van Buren, Harrison. So this is, again, the unit started all over again. We're starting at the same time again. And so, folks, all good stuff, but here's the interesting part. One of the most important things made through interchangeable parts was what? Guns. And where were we making guns in the country, folks? This was all benefiting the North. So here's the interesting thing. Remember how Eli Whitney caused slavery with the cotton gin? Well, because of interchangeable parts in the North, he also allowed allowed the mass production of guns to allow the North to win the Civil War. So Eli Whitney both caused the Civil War and ended the Civil War with his two different technologies. He caused the slavery that caused the Civil War, and he created the weapons to end the Civil War. Eli Whitney, unable to choose a side. Good? Yes?
Do you think his family's inheriting a lot of their money, like right now?
It's hard now because I don't think interchangeable parts is patented. Like, it's an idea, but you can't patent. Well, I guess you could patent an idea. They're making a lot of money off the cotton gin, but no one's making that anymore.
No. So
But they're not as rich as, like, Bill Gates. I really don't know, though. I mean, go look it up. I really have no idea. They could be, but I don't know if you can patent this, and no one uses cotton gin. So, or at least they shouldn't be. But, yeah. Yes? They still exist, yes. And again, as a person that likes to collect antiques, if I could ever come across a cotton gin, I'd probably buy one. Another technology, the steam engine, created by Oliver Evans. Steam engines are good because what do they allow for? The use of machines. Allows them to power machines. Because, folks, before, if you had a machine, how would it be powered? By hand. You'd be like, all right, guys, go. I'm going to start turning this for 9 hours. But again, with the steam engine, does it do it automatically? Just powers it. Good so far? Another technology, vulcanized rubber. And vulcanized rubber was created by this guy, Charles Goodyear. Oh, like Goodyear tires? Yeah. Because your tires on your car are not made of regular rubber. They're made of vulcanized rubber. Because, folks, if your tire was made out of the same stuff that rubber bands are made out of, why would that be a problem? They could tear, they'll break, they'll become brittle, they'll rip apart, your car will bounce all over the place. I mean, problem. But with vulcanized rubber, it made rubber stronger. But here's the question. We didn't have cars back then. So what was this vulcanized rubber being used for? It wasn't used for tires. Not for tar. For turning. It's for factory belts. So we were using vulcanized rubber back then for factory. Because don't we have a lot of moving parts in factories? And that timing belt or that factory belt will allow the machine to continue going. So they were used for factory belts. Why can't you use regular rubber bands for that? They'll rip or those get too stretchy and not doing anything anymore, right? Like you've seen it in your car, or like just you guys know what I'm talking about, right? You have two things connected by a belt. If the belt gets too loose, are they going to keep turning? They're not. So again, it has to keep that rigidity, but does still have to be a little bit flexible. And vulcanized rubber allowed for that. So, vulcanized rubber. The last technology you should know is the sewing machine, developed by Elias Howe and Isaac Singer. And again, folks, because of the sewing machine, People no longer had to sew how? By hand. They can now sew by machine, which means by hand, where did we used to make clothes? If you were sewing by hand still? The cottage at the house. But now by machine, where are you making your clothes? In the textile factories. Yeah, folks, the word textile just means what?
Material.
Like clothing, yeah, textile clothing. Cool.
Didn't all these inventions lead to the downfall of what's it called? Artists?
Yeah, did these inventions lead to the destruction of like artists and crafts, like guilds and whatever else? Most definitely. Why would I ask someone to make me a gun that costs $5,000 when I can go buy a gun that works almost exactly the same? It might not look as nice, but it still shoots people for like $200. I mean, look at like custom cars. You buy a Honda, it costs $17,000. But you buy like a limited edition Lamborghini, it costs like $700,000. That's more artisan and crafty, but it still drives just like a Honda does. I mean, like, it's obviously faster, but does it get you from point A to point B?
Yeah.
Sure. So it just depends on your willingness to invest in the craft. But it did result in the end of artisan crafting. Factory conditions. Let's talk about that real quick. Factory conditions. So, folks, what do you think factory conditions were like? Bad. Unfortunately, with the one exception of with the exception of what factories? With the exception of the Lowell mills, factory conditions were poor. Poor working conditions. Many of these poor working conditions included long hours and what else? What's usually the flip side of that? Low wages. You could say crowded, dirty, unsanitary, hot, poor ventilation. Women and children earned less than men. Women and children earned less than men. In fact, folks, in 1820, half the workers in the U.S., here's a mind-blowing number. By 1820, half the workers in the U.S. were under the age of 10. Yeah, think about that for a second. What did we use the children for? Yeah, to like work the machines. Because, if something got jammed, we'd have to take that little kid and be like, hey, I can't get in there. Can you get in there and like unjam that? And by the way, they wouldn't shut the machine off because that would take way too much time. You had to like restart, whatever else. So he'd like, can you reach your hand in there and snatch it? So he'd reach his hand in there and he'd snatch it. If he was lucky, he'd be able to go away scot-free. But in several cases, not most, but in several cases, their fingers might get crushed, their arm might get torn off. If you were a young lady, oftentimes your hair would get caught in the machine and it'd tear your scalp off. Yeah. Just think about that for a second.
And that's why everyone has buns.
Which is why, this is why everyone is keeping their hair in like buns, because you don't want like hair just like flowing all over the place. You keep your hair though close because you don't want just like getting caught by a machine.
And then what if they just wrap it up and yet continue working?
Wouldn't they just wrap it up and continue working? Yeah, if you got injured, it'd be like, hey, sorry you got injured, here's the rest of your money, and you're fired because you're useless to me now. So, most cases they wouldn't let you keep working because it's not like we had insurance back then. If I get injured at work, do I get disability insurance? Sure, but if this was back then, if I got injured at work, I'm like, you can't teach anymore, get out of here. You're useless to us. So, Anyway, folks, people complain about the poor working conditions, so eventually these workers began to form what? Unions. And eventually these unions would organize, and what would they do to try to get what they wanted? Strike. They would strike. And usually, what is the one thing or two things they would ask for? What's the one thing, obviously, they would ask for? Better working conditions. And the other? More dinero. Maraming pera. more money. Maraming pera. Más dinero. 很多钱. And in response to all these labor unions being formed, the Supreme Court ruled that labor unions were what?
Legal.
Constitutional. He ruled that they were constitutional. Because he said that labor unions were only trying to do what? Protect the rights of who? The common man and the workers. So, Supreme Court ruled that labor unions were constitutional because all they were trying to do were trying to protect people's rights or the common man's rights. Now, the reason why this case went up in the first place is business owners. Do they like labor unions? They hate them. They're like, this union is trying to destroy my business. So they tried to prevent them from forming unions, saying, they're a conspiracy. They're trying to ruin society. But he said, no, they're not. You guys are just cheap, so they're asking for more money. That's all it is. So again, Commonwealth v. Hunt. Questions, comments, concerns about Commonwealth v. Hunt? Labor unions are good? Yes, ma'am. That they were constitutional. They ruled that they were constitutional because they protected the common man's rights. So, last slide. Significance of the market revolution. Number one, it resulted in the integrated national market. It resulted in the integrated national market. So again, significance of the market revolution. Number one, it resulted in the integrated national market. And because we have an integrated national market, why does that benefit us? Why is it good that we now have an integrated national market? How does that make us better as a country? Yeah, our country is now what? Self-sufficient. So we are now self-sufficient with our integrated national market. Boom! We have regional specialization. And why is that good for our economy? Why is having regional specialization good for the economy? They can specialize, yes, but why is specializing good? We could become more efficient. So it's about efficiency. By specializing, we become more efficient. And number three, you see the rise of a more connected society. Which benefited the common man. Okay, so here's what you're going to do now. Just go ahead and we're going to go ahead and prepare two possible essays. Pretty easy, just charting real quick. So you're going to go ahead and chart this. So go ahead and write down the question. You should do it on a sheet where you can put down all your facts on one page. So you can, if you have enough paper on that page, that's fine. But if you're like 2/3 of the way down, I recommend a different page. Write down the question, and all I'm asking you to do, you don't have to answer the question. All I want you to do in the next 8 to 9 minutes is to go through your notes and write down all of the facts regarding transportation, the 3 facts regarding communication, the facts regarding agriculture, and the facts regarding manufacturing, so that if you were going to write an essay on this, would all your facts be in one place? Yes. So go ahead and spend about 9 minutes doing this. And And then we'll revisit this question as a class thereafter. So you have 9 minutes. Go over and write down all the facts. Again, all like the roads, the name of the roads, key facts, the invention is really what we're looking for. Write down the question, but don't worry about answering the question. You're just writing down facts about these 4 categories. Okay? Get to work. And this should be pretty easy, folks, because I lectured in these categories, so just put them all on one page. Just the facts, too. down the facts, you're not explaining it. This is just, I want a one-pager of just facts. That way you can revisit it later if you need to. But the goal is just to write down your facts. You can explain it to yourself later if you want to. Right now, it's just facts.
No.
This one's like my
All right, let's go over this list quickly. So going over transportation, someone raise their hand and tell me what can we write down for transportation. So yeah, go ahead. Steamboat, give me the rest of the list. Steamboat, what else? For transportation, we don't really use a Pony Express for transportation. That's for like delivering mail, but what else? What's what? Regional specialization, sure. So be more specific with roads. Like which roads? Lancaster Turnpike. Yeah, the Erie Canal. And then what else? Iron Horse. the B&O Railroad. Very good. Are there any other things that we can add to transportation? Yes. Huh? Cumberland Road, yes. Very good. So these are all facts you can use for transportation. Who can raise their hand and tell me facts for communication? Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Telegram.
Telegraph.
Oh, sorry.
What else?
Regional specialization.
Regional specialization, sure.
Pony Express.
Pony Express.
Transatlantic Cable.
Transatlantic Cable, good. So all good things for communication. Agriculture. Who wants to give me the list for agriculture? Yes.
Steel plow.
Steel plow. What else?
Mechanical
Mechanical Mower-Reaper. And what else? Cotton gin. Very good. And lastly, manufacturing. Who wants to give me the list for manufacturing? Yes, sir.
Lowell Mills.
Lowell Mills.
Interchangeable Parts. Steam engine. Sewing machine.
Yep. Steam engine.
Integrated national market.
Hang on. You have interchangeable parts. Sewing machine. You can also talk about Samuel Slater. So, do you have a lot to talk about if you're writing about technology and inventions here?
A lot.
A lot to talk about.
What does it say on the culture? The end?
A mechanical Mower-Reaper. Now, if you were going to answer this question, the question is asking, what was more important? Transportation or agriculture and manufacturing? Now, they're saying developments of transportation rather than in agriculture or manufacturing sparked the economic growth. So the question is, do you agree or disagree? So how many of you believe that agriculture and manufacturing was more important than transportation? 1, 2, a few more. How many of you believe that transportation was more important than agriculture and manufacturing? Majority of you. Okay, now here's the thing, folks. Can you argue this either way? Of course you can. But I think the stronger argument is for transportation, and here's why. Yes, you have a lot more products that you're making. But what?
You can't do it without them.
You can't ship any of it without transportation. Now, the opposite argument can be made. Well, look, you may have all these roads, but you wouldn't be able to pay for them if you weren't taxing us on all these products that we were selling. Or we wouldn't need roads if it wasn't for this mass production of goods. But the other argument's a little bit stronger, right? The idea that there'd be no point in making these products if there were no roads. So I do think that you would say, assess the validity of this statement. You would say this statement is what? It's not that valid. Or is it, I would disagree with the statement because, and you go along with it. Or, I would agree with the statement because, and then could you make an argument with this essay? Not too bad, right? The other essay you probably should prepare for, and we'll do this one together right now. Write it down first, build the chart, and we'll talk about it. By the way, here's a hint. You're going to be using the exact same facts. But write this down real quick. Here's the other possible essay you might encounter. Yeah, write down the question, folks, and then we're going to do this one together. So the question here is asking, analyze the impact of the market revolution on the economies of two of the following regions. So pretty much it's asking is what? What is another way to reframe this question? Not which of these impacted the market revolution. It's the other way around. How were they impacted by the market revolution? How were these regions impacted by the market revolution? And pretty much it's asking what changed, right? What was different before and after, which is pretty easy. So we have the Northeast, the Midwest, and the South. So by show of hands, how many of you, because you can only get to talk about two, would write about the Northeast? If you had an essay, how many of you guys would choose the Northeast as one of your two? Okay. How many of you would choose the Midwest as one of your two? Okay. And how many of you would choose the South as one of your two? Okay. So, let's start off with the South, and we're going to go right to left. So the South, there's only so many things you can talk about here. But the two technologies that you should talk about impacting the South are first transportation. What's the transportation technology that impacted the South? Steamboat, good. And here you can talk about trade. That's really important there. Trade. With regard to agriculture, what's the technology that changed the South? Cotton gin. And that change would look like slavery and plantations. And then you're done with the South, right? Does that make sense to everyone? That's the change. That's the impact. The Midwest. What types of technologies or improvements can we talk about? Steel plow? And the mechanical Mower-Reaper? You can say that made farmers what? What's the impact? They grew cash crops, more money. They ended what? Subsistence. What other things can we talk about for the Midwest? Roads? Canals? Railroads? Because how did this impact the Midwest? What could they now do? Trade. And, well, they could trade before, but they could trade what? Faster. And what about the Northeast? What can we talk about with the Northeast? Interchangeable parts. Which led to the increase of what? Factories. If we're talking about factories, who else should we mention? The Lowell mills. And who's the father? Samuel Slater. Talk about labor unions, if you wanted to. That's a change. Talk about the cottage industry, to the factories, steam engine. And are those pretty much the same facts that we just talked about in the last one? Yeah. And then if we wanted to, couldn't we do another essay about how these facts... We're not gonna, but I'm saying, if we did, couldn't we write another essay about how these same facts benefited the common man? So the point of this exercise today, folks, is to show you, can you take the same facts and answer a variety of questions? So long as you understand the fact, can you use those facts as tools to fix any problem? That's really the point with this exercise. Two different questions, same tools to answer them. Make sense? Okay. Any clarifications on what I've written down here? All right. So I do want to make sure I give you a break from lecturing on the economy, because I feel like you had a lot of lecture today on the economy. So we're going to go ahead and lecture on Manifest Destiny instead, because it's different. So Section 3 of Unit 4. Don't worry, I want to give you guys a break. So,
break like a little video or something.
not today. So let's talk about Unit 4, Section 3, Expansion in the Roaring Forties and Manifest Destiny. All right, the Jacksonian Era. Again, think about the common man as we're talking about expansion in this time period. And we're going to be talking about manifest destiny. So, first off, here's what we do know. In Unit 1, we got this territory, right? We got the 13 states. In Unit 2, we got all of this. In Unit 3, we got all of this. In Unit 4, we're going to get all of this. So we're going to expand all the way across to the Pacific Ocean at the end of this unit. And so, that's why we need to talk about this today, to show this final westward expansion from sea to shining sea. That's where that phrasing comes from. And so, to get us started off today, I want you to take 30 seconds, and I want you to quietly, without talking to anyone, look at this image. Kind of jot down in your mind what you see, and I'll call on a few of you guys to kind of illustrate what's happening here. So, quietly to yourself for 30 seconds, just look at this image. Shh. Shh. Okay, for about 20 seconds, talk to a partner. Tell them what you see. What do you notice? What's happening here? Who do you notice? Make some predictions. Okay, so who can raise their hand and tell me what they see? So it's a few things. Yeah.
The ladies leading the people west.
So this lady here might be leading these people west. Let's talk about this lady real quick. Who might she represent? Maybe a religious saint, but more likely she represents America, the spirit of America. Columbia, the spirit of America. Likely she represents Columbia. Let's continue talking about her real quick. How does she look? Does she look evil?
No.
Elegant, angelic, all white, almost angelic as you guys describe? What's she carrying? This book. So some people say it's a Bible. It could also be a book of laws, but it's likely one of those two. And she's also carrying this wire. What is that? It's communication. It's a telegraph cable. And is she bringing it with her as she goes?
Yeah.
Interesting. So what do you think that represents her carrying this Bible or book of laws and this cable? What is she doing? She's bringing technology and civilization and government with her as she moves west. Who's going with her? Farmers are going with. Look, a steel plow. I don't think they're going with her. Who else is going with her? No, who else is going with her? Like maybe these miners, railroads, cowboys, Wells Fargo wagon, some stagecoaches. Now, someone said that they noticed Native Americans. Now, here's the thing about Native Americans. Are they going with her?
No, they're running away.
These natives are being almost chased away or forced away. Interesting. What about these animals here? Are they going with them?
No.
Also being pushed away. Run away. Here's the other thing I want you to notice. As you look at this image from right to left, what is happening? It's getting darker. So, where we came from, what is it? No, I mean in terms of light. It's lighter. So it's darker on the left side, so what is expected? No, what's going to happen? We're going to bring the light with us. We're going to bring the light of civilization. We're going to bring the light of knowledge. We're going to bring the light of technology as we move forward. So it's dark and cloudy, but are we going to make that better? We are going to fix that. And lastly, folks, this right here, that's the Pacific Ocean. This right here, that's the Atlantic Ocean. Look how busy it is. That's probably like Boston or New York, right? Busy? What mountain range is this? That's the Rocky Mountains, which means this image is supposed to be the entire expanse of the United States. Does this suggest what's going to be happening in this unit? Yes, it does. This image, folks, and what we're going to describe in this unit is Manifest Destiny. You only have to write down the title, Manifest Destiny. You don't have to write down the description. But Manifest Destiny means the God-given right to expand west. That's Manifest Destiny. The God-given right to expand west. Why are we expanding west, folks? Because God said we can. And why is that somewhat of a dangerous notion? If we believe that Manifest Destiny is our God-given right to expand west, why might that be a problem? I mean, folks, does that justify anything that we do?
Yeah, massacre.
If we massacre Native Americans, is that okay?
Yeah.
Because God said so. We're allowed to do that. If we murder your people, that's okay because we're doing it for society. We're killing your people to save them. If that makes any sense. But that's the argument. If we're saying that we're doing what we're doing because God said we can, is there any accountability? We're doing it because God said so, so it's okay. We can do whatever we want. And that's what's going to happen. This idea of Manifest Destiny was created by this guy, John O'Sullivan. And John O'Sullivan wrote for a newspaper called the Democratic Review, and he said that the right of our manifest destiny to spread and to possess the whole of on the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federative development of self-government entrusted to us. It is right such as that of the tree to the space of air, and the earth suitable for the full expansion of its principle and destiny of growth. We will expand across the continent because it is our duty, it is our right, and it has been entrusted to us by God to do so. So we're doing it not just because we want to, we're doing it because we've been told to do so. And so will that justify any horrible actions that we commit? At least we think it will. We think it will. I don't think Native Americans will agree, but that's what we're going to do. So, let us expand. First off, a really short one. The Aroostook War. This was literally a war between lumberjacks, also known as a lumberjack war. But the Aroostook War was a war between U.S. and Canadian lumberjacks. And they're like fighting each other with axes, which is pretty cool. And also really, really horrific. But folks, why do you think these Canadian and American lumberjacks were fighting? Well, they're cutting trees down, and what was not clear, and therefore they had a war? The border. The border was very unclear. So the Canadians were cutting in American soil, and we were cutting in Canadian soil. And so what ends up happening is we resolve this with the Webster-Ashburton Treaty of 1842. And all the Webster-Ashburton Treaty did was that it established the main Canadian border. So this area right here. Well, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Cool. That's all you have to know about the Aroostook War. It created the main Canadian border with the Webster-Ashburton Treaty. Questions there? Okay. Well, then let us talk about Texas. All right, folks, here we go. The Texas Saga. Some of this stuff we're going to go by pretty quickly because we don't have to know all of it. A lot of it is just like background information. So jot it down. Don't get all crazy about all the facts, but I'll tell you what you need to know. Here's what happened, folks. In 1821, Mexico declared independence from whom? Which country? Spain. They don't speak French in Mexico. So, in 1821, Mexico declares independence from España, and they become an independent country. Good so far. Okay. With that independence came a lot of territory. And that territory included what? Texas. It included Texas, California, whatever else. That's now part of Mexico at this time. So Texas, or rather Mexico, decides, you know what we need to do? We need to populate Texas. Because having land is great, but having no one in that land is stupid, right? So they decided that Mexico began to ask Americans to move to Texas. They said, hey, you Americans living in the South. It's not like I'm going to start rapping. Hey, you Americans living in the South. Right? I'm going to start like rapping there. No. Hey, you Americans living in the South, why not move to Texas? It still sounds like I'm rapping. Because I'm speaking iambic pentameter for some reason, and so it sounds like a rap is about to happen. Like someone's going to drop a beat. And I'm like, but why not move to Texas for free land? And is that a pretty big draw for a lot of Americans? It's like, oh, free land sold. Because do all Americans want free land?
Yes.
Of course they do. And why does Mexico want all these Americans to move to Texas? How would they benefit from people living in Texas? What could these Americans do? It's not just population. What are the Americans literally going to do? Yeah, they're going to break the land. They're going to work the land. Are they going to bring innovations and technology with them? I mean, if they're not there, this land is just plain desert. But if the Americans go there, might they build roads and towns and bridges and farms? And would Mexico benefit from that? So they said, that's what we want, for you to come to Texas and make it better. But there was a catch. Because you don't just give free land for nothing, right? They said, here's what we ask of you Americans. If you're going to come to Texas and get free land, here's the expectation. Number one, you have to become Catholic. The first expectation is you must become Catholic because here in Mexico, what are we? Catholic. Number two, you must become a Mexican citizen. Because does it make sense for an American citizen to be living in Mexico? No, you must become one of us. 3, you must assimilate. What does that mean? What does it mean to assimilate? You must adopt Mexican culture. Eat the foods that we eat. Speak the language that we speak. Watch the novellas that we watch. But again, you have to assimilate into Mexican culture. Because again, do we want white Americans just walking around not being Mexican? No, we're giving you the land. Appreciate it. But the most important rule, folks, no slavery. No slavery. You can't bring slavery into Texas. And they had a really good reason why, folks. Let me explain. What is the justification for slavery? Why did white people say they were allowed to have slaves? Yeah, because whites were better than blacks. It was based on race, right? It was based on racism. So here's the problem, though. If there's a justification that says that whites are better than blacks, where do Mexicans fit in?
In the middle.
In the middle. But does that mean that whites are still higher than them?
Yes.
So they said, we don't like a structure that puts different races on different platforms. We all should be equal. So they said, no slavery, absolutely not. But for the most part, folks, is this a pretty good deal? You know, you become Mexican, whatever else, but the land is free, so why not? And so, Sam Houston and Steve Austin agree. These are the first two people that agree to move to Texas. Sam Houston and Steve Austin. And they bring over 300 families with them. So Sam Houston featured here with his cane. And Steve Austin featured here with that stone cold look of his. Houston, Texas. Austin, Texas. So they moved to Texas. But here's the problem. They refuse to obey Mexican laws. They don't obey Mexican laws. Especially which one? The slave one. So they start bringing in all these slaves. And is Mexico okay with that? Said, whoa, buddy, we gave you all this free land. You can't just come into our territory and do whatever you want. You have to follow the rules. And Sam Houston and Steve Austin, all these Americans, these Texans. By the way, Texans are Americans living in Texas. Okay? These Texans said, no, we're not going to follow your rules. We're going to do whatever we want. And so Mexico said, oh, these darn Americans, fine. So in 1829, because they were so frustrated with these Americans not following the rules, in 1829, Mexico closed the border to America. Or rather, Mexico closed immigration to Texas. So in 1829, Mexico closed immigration to Texas, saying, no, you're not going to follow our rules? Then no, you can't come to Texas anymore. So Mexico closed immigration to Texas, which created the most ironic twist of all time when Americans who refused to obey that law began to illegally immigrate into Mexico. So Americans refusing to obey the restriction on immigration, white Americans began to illegally immigrate into Mexico. And that happened. So think about that for a second. Americans complain about Mexicans immigrating to America all the time, but back in 1829, white Americans illegally immigrated into Mexico. They would cross the river and cross the border and all that stuff and did the exact same thing. Irony. Well, by 1830, folks, 30,000 American Texans outnumbered the Tejanos. What are Tejanos? Mexicans living in Texas. So now there are more Americans than there are Mexicans. And the 30,000 Texans outnumbered the Tejanos. I mean, they're still both Texans, but Texans and Tejanos. One's Mexican, one's not. So, is Mexico happy about this? They're like, oh, they're running amok up there in Texas. We must do something about this. So, General Santa Anna became military dictator of Mexico, and he said, no, I won't allow any of this in Texas. Texas. So, what General Santa Anna does is he sends a 6,000-man army to Texas. And he said, I will force you to obey our Mexican laws. And he means it. He's a military dictator in Mexico at the time. How does Texas respond to this threat? They go, oh, really? You're going to come and attack us? Well, in response, Texas declares independence. Like, screw you, Mexico, we're going to make our own country. So they do. And in 1836, Texas declares independence, and they become the Republic of Texas. They become their own country in 1836. Because remember, folks, did they just join the United States? No. They just said, we're independent now. And they're their own country. Now, do they want to be part of the U.S.? They do, actually, because the U.S. has this great economy. But America's like, I don't know if we should get involved. If we get involved, what's going to happen? War with Mexico. So we're going to try to avoid that for now. So they become the Republic of Texas. Does Mexico like the fact that Texas has declared independence? No, they're going to get all Great Britain on them. And you have the famous Battle of the Alamo. At the Battle of the Alamo, 6,000 Mexicans murder over 200 Texans and Tejanos. I should note that even though there are Tejanos living in Texas, do they want to serve under the military dictator? No, so they would rather be independent with the rest of them. So Texans and Tejanos both declared independence, and so they fought against the 6,000-man army of General Santa Anna, and they were all killed. Every last one of them was killed. Not the 6,000-man army. All the Americans and Texans were killed. And how did America feel about that? Were we happy about that? No, we were very sad about that. And so the very famous phrase occurs in all of America, remember the Alamo. Now again, is America going to declare war on Mexico? No, because they want to avoid war. So nonetheless, America does not declare war on Mexico. But Americans begin to volunteer for the Texas Volunteer Army. So again, Americans begin to volunteer for the Texas Volunteer Army. Are we officially helping Texas as a country? No, we're not. But are individuals helping Texas? Yes, and that's okay, because the U.S. government is still sitting back doing nothing. And again, why are we doing nothing again, folks? Avoid war. Eventually, folks, the Texans are able to hold off Santa Anna long enough where he just gives up. And they remain the Lone Star Republic, and they become their own country from 1836 until 1846. So, just be aware of that for now. And in that time, could we have made them part of the U.S.?
Yes.
But why didn't we?
They don't want to pay the war.
Because Mexico was like, if you annex Texas, we're going to go to war with you. So we're like, all right, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to sit by and do nothing. So that's Texas. Everyone good on Texas so far? We'll revisit them in a second. The other territory you should know is Oregon. Who controls the Oregon Territory at this time? Not the natives. Not just the British. The British and the Americans jointly control Oregon country because of the Treaty of 1818. Treaty that we signed back in Unit 3. So here we are jointly controlling the Oregon country. And the Oregon country is pretty sweet. A lot of natural resources out there, a lot of woods, a lot of animals, a lot of fisheries. It's really nice territory. And we're jointly controlling it, but what would both of us rather do? Own it ourselves. So both of us want to completely control Oregon. And America says, we might have an advantage here. And why might America have an advantage over England? Because we're already there. Like, we live, 2,000 miles away. England lives 5,000 miles away. So, what we decide to do is we start moving Americans over to Oregon via the Oregon Trail. So we start moving Americans over to Oregon across the Oregon Trail. And by doing so, in the 1840s, we end up moving 5,000 Americans to Oregon. How many British do you think were living in Oregon Territory at this time? We have 5,000. How many do you think they had? 700. So, do we now have more people than they do? Can we now say, oh, maybe you should just give it to us because there's more of us there? It's like, I don't know, there's ice cream in the freezer and you ate half of it already. It's like, probably should just give it to me because I ate most of it. That's what you should do. Go eat your brother's hamburger and be like, I already ate most of it, so you just give it to me. Now, also, let's say the British are not willing to accept that. Having 5,000 over 700 is also good if what? If war breaks out. So we're like, all right, sweet, we're covered. Well, nonetheless, by the way, if you've never played the game Oregon Trail, you should, because it's pretty fun. You can get dysentery and get bit by a snake, and you can get malaria and cholera. It's good times. And you cross. Pretty cool. Fun time. Played it when I was in 4th grade. 4th grade. Anyway, America has Oregon fever. We really want this territory. So here, folks, is the Oregon country. And America, how much of it do they want? They want all of it, because we have Oregon fever. So the U.S., or the United States, they want all of Oregon. And so we say, England, we want all of Oregon. We want Oregon all the way up to the 5440 parallel. Or else what? You give us all of it, or we fight. We want the entire Oregon Territory, 5440 or fight. 5440 or fight. Now, are we being a bit greedy here? We're demanding all of it. England's like, you want all of it? All of it? Well, that's not fair, America. We jointly controlled this for 30 years. England said, well, what about at the 49th parallel? Right here. Would that be fair? England thinks it would be fair. Why? Because it's pretty much right down the middle, and we're still giving America most of it. And the border already exists with Canada, so why not the 49th parallel? England thought they were being very reasonable. They're like, well, here, 49th parallel. Just take that all the way across to the Pacific Ocean. And America was like, no! We're not going to do that. 54-40 or fight. Now, if we annex all of it, what's going to happen? What's the possibility? We might go to war. So, is this a problem? All right, so there's a potential war in Texas, right? There's a potential war in Oregon. This is an issue. And so, in the election of 1844, the major election issue, folks, is what? What's the major election issue of 1844? The annexation of what? Of Texas and Oregon. Because annexation of either will mean what? War. So, that's the major election issue of this time. Should we annex or not annex? Oregon or Texas? The Democrats and James K. Polk, were they for or against annexation? Democrats. For. Because all that extra land is good for who? Common man. So the Democrats, they want all that land. And so Democrats nominate James K. Polk. Great question. What is annexation? Annexation means to make it part of the country. So let's say I was walking by your house, and I like your house. I'm going to annex that. Your house is now my house. That's what America wanted to do. When we take on new territories, we annex it. When we bought the Louisiana Purchase, we annexed the Louisiana Purchase. So the question now is, should we annex Texas or Oregon? But the same question is also, if we annex these territories, it also means what? War. So that's the other question. Do we truly want war? The Whigs nominate Henry Clay. And he said, avoid war. But no one listens to Henry Clay. And he's not going to win the presidency again because he's never going to win the presidency. And so, K. Polk wins 170 to 105, stomping Henry Clay again. And that makes James K. Polk the 11th President of the United States. What do we know about him? One-term president. Okay. What did he do as president? Well, he annexed Texas. So what do we expect to happen? War! But it didn't. Mexico said, but that's about it. They wanted to go to war, but realistically, were they going to win that war? No. Mexico's a prideful country, but did they have the military that America had? No, they weren't as industrialized yet. And we said, look, I'll risk going to war with Mexico. We'll probably win that war. So Polk annexed Texas, and Mexico did nothing. Now, Oregon. Polk annexed Oregon where? At 5440 or 49? At 49. He annexed it at the 49th parallel. And so who was really upset about this? A lot of his supporters. He said, I voted for you for 5440, and all you're giving me is 49? Why did I vote for you in the first place? And so many of his supporters felt betrayed. You said, you lost all this territory, Polk. You lied. You promised us that territory and you didn't give it to us. And so many of his supporters were angry. But why do you think he did it? Yeah, because if we go to war with England, is that a war that we might actually lose? Yeah, so he did it to avoid war with the British. Cool? Okay. So on Thursday, folks, or on Friday, depending on when I see you guys again, We're going to talk about the Mexican-American War. Or as the Mexicans call it, the War of Northern Intervention. Because it's us going into their country. Do your homework if you haven't finished chapter 14 already. If you still need to complete your study guide for the retake test, make sure you complete that. Otherwise, have a good day, folks. Wait for the bell, and I'll see you later.